She cheated on me last night. At least, that's what I thought. The words repeated in my head like a broken record as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Outside, the city hummed with life, streetlights flickered, the distant sound of laughter drifted from the bars, and the occasional car whooshed past. But all of it faded into the background, because all I could see was her. Victoria, wrapped in a sleek black dress, her hair in loose waves the way I liked, slipping into the dimly lit hotel lobby as if she belonged there. She hadn't seen me. I had followed her, my stomach churning with a sick mixture of dread and disbelief. I wasn't the jealous type. I wasn't the kind of man who checked his wife's phone or questioned her every move. But something had been wrong for weeks now, little things I ignored at first. Late nights at work. Unexplained absences. The way she started locking her phone, something she had never done before. And then, yesterday evening, she had kissed me on the cheek, smiled in that distracted way she did when she wasn't really present, and told me she was meeting a friend for dinner. Only, her friend had texted me earlier that day, completely unaware of any such plans. So I followed her. And now, I was here, watching. I should have stormed in after her. Should have demanded an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the desperate hope that I was wrong. So instead, I waited. And that's when I saw him. Tall, sharply dressed, and confident in a way that made my stomach turn. He walked into the hotel just minutes after Victoria, scanning the lobby with practiced ease before striding toward the elevators. She was waiting for him. I had to grip the edge of my seat to keep from getting out of the car right then and there. The thought of her in a hotel room with another man made my blood boil, but the cold, rational part of me whispered, "Wait. Watch. Know for sure." So I did. I waited until I saw her step out of the elevator on the 5th floor, her head turning toward the hallway as if searching for someone. Then he appeared. They met in the middle of the hallway. And then she did it. Victoria leaned in, placed a hand on his chest, and whispered something in his ear. A secret. A promise. A betrayal. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might break. But even then, something didn't add up. Because the look on her face, it wasn't the look of a woman meeting a lover. It wasn't longing. It wasn't passion. It was something else. Something I couldn't quite place. And that was when I knew this was only the beginning. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I sat in my car outside the hotel, watching, waiting. The neon glow of the sign flickered above me, casting an eerie light onto the street. My mind ran in circles, chasing questions with no answers. How long had this been going on? Who was he? And why did it feel like, despite everything, I was still missing something? I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Not without knowing exactly what I was up against. So I waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. An hour into 2. I thought about going inside, about demanding to know the truth, but something in me refused to move. Maybe I wanted to see it for myself, to witness her walk out of that hotel, her hair tousled, her lipstick smudged, her guilt written all over her face. At 12:17 a.m., she emerged. Victoria stepped out of the hotel alone. My fingers clenched around the steering wheel as I watched her glance over her shoulder, scanning the street. Was she checking to see if someone had followed her? Or was she looking for him? She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and typed something quickly before hurrying toward her car. I barely breathed as I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the night. I exhaled sharply. She didn't leave with him. That should have meant something, but instead, it only made the pit in my stomach deeper. I needed to know who he was. I pushed open my car door and stepped into the cold night air. The hotel lobby was nearly empty, the receptionist barely glancing up as I walked past. I hesitated at the elevators, my reflection staring back at me in the gleaming metallic doors. I looked like a man unraveling. The doors slid open, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the 5th floor. My pulse pounded as I reached the hallway where I had seen them together. The corridor was silent, the patterned carpet muffling my footsteps. Room numbers blurred in my vision as I walked past them, one by one, until I reached it. Room 514. I stared at the door. His door. I had no plan. No excuse if someone opened it. But my hand still curled into a fist and knocked. Seconds passed. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Footsteps. The sound of a lock clicking open. The door swung inward, and I found myself face to face with the man from earlier. Up close, he was younger than I expected. Mid-30s, maybe. Sharp suit. Watch that probably cost more than my mortgage. His eyes flickered with recognition when he saw me. He knew who I was. Which meant this wasn't just some random fling. I braced myself for a fight, for an arrogant smirk, a taunting remark, anything. But instead, he sighed. Alex, he said, as if my name was a burden. I froze. How the hell did he know my name? A chill ran down my spine. Whatever this was, whatever Victoria was involved in, it was bigger than I thought. And I had no idea what I had just walked into. I had prepared myself for a lot of things when that door opened, an arrogant smirk, a defensive excuse, even a punch. But I hadn't expected him to say my name. It stopped me cold. Alex, he repeated, rubbing his temple as if I were an inevitable headache he had been waiting for. He didn't look nervous. Didn't look like a man caught in the middle of an affair. He just looked tired. I took a step forward, barely holding my anger in check. Who the hell are you? The man exhaled sharply and glanced down the hallway, as if making sure no one else was listening. Then, in a lowered voice, he said, "You shouldn't be here." I nearly laughed. Yeah? And why is that? He hesitated. For the first time, there was a flicker of something in his expression, uncertainty, maybe even guilt. I didn't know if I wanted to punch him or shake him for answers. Then he did something I didn't expect. He stepped aside. "Come in," he said. I should have walked away. I should have left and confronted Victoria instead of playing whatever twisted game this was. But my curiosity, my need to know, won out. I stepped inside. The hotel room was expensive, minimalist. A single suitcase sat near the desk, half unpacked. There was no trace of Victoria, no lipstick-stained wine glasses, no tangled sheets. Not what I expected from an affair. The man shut the door behind me. I didn't sit. Didn't relax. My whole body was on edge, waiting for an explanation. "You have 5 seconds to tell me what's going on before I make you regret opening that door," I said, my voice low. The man sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "You think Victoria is cheating on you?" The way he said it, like it wasn't a question, like he already knew exactly what was going through my head, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "You didn't answer my question," I said. "Who are you?" He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "My name is Daniel Carter," he said, "and I'm a private investigator." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "A private investigator?" He nodded. "Hired by your wife." I felt like the ground had been yanked out from under me. I shook my head. "No, that doesn't make any sense." But even as I said it, something in me shifted. The locked phone. The late nights. The way she had been looking at me lately, like she was searching for something. Victoria wasn't having an affair. She was investigating me. I stared at the man in front of me, trying to make sense of it. Why would she hire a PI to follow me? Daniel studied me for a moment, then reached for a file sitting on the desk. He flipped it open and turned it toward me. Inside were photographs. Of me. Me at work. Me going for a run. Me sitting alone at a cafe, lost in thought. Weeks' worth of surveillance, all neatly compiled. My blood ran cold. "She wanted to know the truth about you," Alex, Daniel said. "The real you." A sick feeling coiled in my stomach. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure what terrified me more, the fact that Victoria had been keeping secrets from me, or the fact that she thought I had secrets worth uncovering. I stared at the photographs spread out before me, my own face staring back in black and white. The images weren't just random snapshots. They were methodical, precise, taken at different times, in different locations. Some during the day, some at night. Someone had been watching me. I swallowed hard, my pulse thundering in my ears. "You're telling me my wife, hired you to investigate me?" Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. "Why?" I demanded. He hesitated. "You tell me." I wanted to punch him, to wipe that measured look off his face. But I forced myself to focus. This didn't make sense. Victoria and I had been married for years. We had built a life together. If she thought I was hiding something, wouldn't she just ask me? Unless... My stomach twisted. Unless she already knew something. "Did she tell you what she was looking for?" I asked. Daniel leaned back against the desk, arms crossed. "She didn't give details. Just that she needed to know if you were being honest with her. That's something about you, about your past, didn't add up." My past. I slid down my spine. For years, I had buried who I used to be. I had reinvented myself. Created a new life. A better one. I had been careful, so careful. But if Victoria had started digging, what had she found? Daniel must have seen the shift in my expression because his eyes sharpened. "You recognize that look, don't you?" he said quietly. "The moment you realize you're not the only one keeping secrets." I forced myself to breathe, to push down the rising panic. "Where is she now?" "She didn't tell me," Daniel said. "She only said she'd make her decision once she had all the information." Decision. My throat felt tight. What decision? He hesitated, then said, whether she was going to stay with you. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I had spent the last 24 hours believing my wife was cheating on me. Instead, she had been deciding whether I was worth staying with. I turned away, pressing my hands to my face, trying to think. Trying to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. Then another thought struck me. If Victoria knew something, if she had dug deep enough to find cracks in my past, then she wasn't safe. There were people who had spent years forgetting I existed. People who wouldn't want my name appearing in someone's investigation. If she kept pushing. My heart clenched. I had to find her. Now. I turned back to Daniel. You're done working for her. His brows lifted slightly. That's not up to you. It is now, I said, my voice low. Because if Victoria keeps digging, she's going to find something neither of us wants her to. For the first time since I met him, Daniel looked uncertain. Good. That meant he understood. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Where are you going? Daniel asked. To find my wife, I said. Before it was too late. Victoria was out there, somewhere, making a choice that could change everything. And I was running out of time. As I left the hotel, my mind raced. Where would she go? If she had been investigating me, she wouldn't just go home and wait. She was searching for something for answers. I needed to think like her. I climbed into my car, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My instincts told me she wouldn't be at our house. If she had come this far, she wouldn't stop now. But if she had been working with Daniel, she must have had a plan, a final piece to whatever puzzle she thought I was hiding. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our shared location history. She had turned off her tracking. Smart, but not smart enough. I opened my call logs and found her last outgoing calls. They're an unfamiliar number, dialed twice in the last hour. I hit the call button. It rang once. Twice. Then, hello. A man's voice. Not Daniel. Someone else. Who is this? I asked, keeping my voice even. A pause. Then, who is this? My stomach twisted. You've been in contact with my wife, Victoria. Another silence, then a quiet chuckle. Ah, so you finally caught up, huh? My blood ran cold. Who the hell was this? Where is she? I demanded. The man sighed. I'm not the one you should be asking. A rustling sound. Then another voice, soft, uncertain. Alex. Victoria. I clenched my jaw. Victoria, where are you? A hesitation. Then she said, we need to talk. Her voice was steady, but I knew her too well. There was an edge to it, something just beneath the surface. She was afraid. Tell me where you are, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. A beat of silence. Then, finally. Pier 17. Warehouse C. I didn't ask why. I didn't hesitate. I just threw the car into gear and drove. Pier 17 was the kind of place where things disappeared. The docks were lined with rusted shipping containers, abandoned warehouses, and the faint, salty bite of the ocean air. By the time I pulled up, the sky was ink black, the streetlights barely flickering to life. I killed the engine and scanned the area. Warehouse C. My gut twisted. Why here? Why not a cafe, a hotel, or even home? Why a place meant for secrets? I stepped out of the car, my pulse hammering. The warehouse loomed ahead, weathered, metal doors slightly ajar. Inside, a dim light flickered. Victoria was waiting. I pushed the doors open. She stood near the center of the empty space, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The sight of her sent a pang through me, the woman I loved, but no longer recognized. She wasn't alone. A man leaned against a crate beside her. Mid-40s, thick build, leather jacket. The same voice I had heard on the phone. Glad you could make it, he said, smirking. I ignored him. Victoria, I said, stepping closer. What the hell is going on? She exhaled, looking at me like she wasn't sure where to start. I needed to know the truth, Alex. My jaw clenched. You think I'm hiding something? Her lips pressed together. She did. She wasn't wrong. But before I could speak, the man beside her let out a low chuckle. Thing is, Alex, he said, standing straight, you weren't the only one keeping secrets. I turned toward him sharply. Who the hell are you? Name's Harris. He tucked his hands into his jacket pockets. Private investigator. My blood turned to ice. Another one? I glanced at Victoria. You didn't just hire Daniel? She shook her head. I wanted to be sure. My mind raced. If she had 2 investigators watching me, she must have suspected something serious. I swallowed hard. And? Did you find what you were looking for? Victoria's throat bobbed as she swallowed. Then, she pulled something from her purse, a file. Thick. Heavy. She tossed it onto a nearby crate. Why don't you tell me, Alex? I hesitated. She stepped closer, her eyes locked onto mine. Searching. Tell me who you really are. The air in the warehouse turned suffocating. Because suddenly, I realized something terrifying. She knew. And now, I had to decide what truth I was willing to give her. The file sat between us like a loaded gun, waiting to go off. I could see it in Victoria's eyes, the storm of emotions raging inside her. She knew something. But how much? And what would she do with it? My fingers twitched at my sides. I could lie. I could spin a half-truth, try to control the damage. But looking at her, standing there with her arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was holding something fragile together, I knew the truth was already unraveling. And I was running out of time. I reached for the file, flipping it open. The first thing I saw was a name. Ethan Cole. My chest tightened. A name I hadn't heard in years. A name that used to be mine. Before I could stop myself, I exhaled sharply. That was all the confirmation Victoria needed. Her voice was barely above a whisper. It's true then. I closed the file slowly, looking up at her. Where did you get this? Harris, the second PI smirked. I have my ways. I ignored him. My focus was on Victoria. The woman I had spent years building a life with. The woman I had lied to from the start. Tell me, she said, her voice trembling. Tell me who you really are. I raked a hand through my hair, glancing at the file again. They had everything, my old name, my records, my past before I became Alex Carter. Before I erased Ethan Cole, I swallowed hard. You already know. But I want to hear it from you. I hesitated, my mind flashing back to a life I had left behind. To the reason I had buried Ethan Cole in the first place. Then, finally, I spoke. I wasn't always the man you married, I said, my voice low. Ethan Cole died a long time ago. I made sure of that. Victoria flinched, her breath hitching. I took a step closer. But I never wanted to lie to you. I swear to God, Victoria, I wanted to keep you out of it. To keep you safe. Safe from what? She demanded. I clenched my jaw. From the people I used to know. The words hung in the air like a noose tightening around us. Victoria stared at me, her hands trembling. Are you dangerous, Alex? I didn't answer right away. Because deep down, I wasn't sure she'd like the truth. And I wasn't sure I could protect her from what came next. Victoria's question hung between us, heavy and unshakable. Are you dangerous, Alex? I could have lied. Told her what she wanted to hear. That I was a good man. That the past was behind me. That she had nothing to fear. But she wouldn't be here if she believed that. I took a slow breath. Not to you. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to believe me. But doubt was written all over her face. Harris, the private investigator, scoffed. You think that's an answer? I shot him a glare. Stay out of this. But Victoria wasn't letting me off the hook. What did you do, Alex? She asked, her voice trembling. Why did you change your name? Who were you running from? The ghosts of my past stirred. Faces I tried to forget. Places I swore I'd never return to. I exhaled sharply. I wasn't running from someone. I was running from who I used to be. I saw the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. She wanted to believe there was a good reason. That whatever I had done, it was justified. But was it? I hesitated. Before you, before this life. I was involved with people I shouldn't have been. Victoria's grip tightened around her arms. Criminals. I didn't answer right away. I could still hear the echoes of the past. The deals made in dimly lit bars. The favors exchanged. The one job that changed everything. I nodded. I got in too deep. And when things went wrong, I had two choices, disappear or end up in the ground. Her breath hitched. Harris let out a low whistle. So, what? You just wiped the slate clean? Became a new man? Something like that. He shook his head. That's not how the world works, buddy. Ghosts don't stay buried forever. I already knew that. Victoria took a shaky breath. And now? Are they still looking for you? I swallowed hard. I don't know. I had spent years covering my tracks, avoiding my old life. But if Victoria had found me, if two private investigators had dug me up, who else was looking? The weight of the moment settled between us. Victoria's eyes were brimming with something I couldn't quite place, fear, anger, maybe even heartbreak. You should have told me, she whispered. I closed my eyes for half a second. I wanted to, but I was afraid you'd leave. And now, I met her gaze. Now, I'm afraid you won't. Because if my past had finally caught up with me, staying by my side was the most dangerous thing she could do. And it might already be too late. The silence inside the warehouse stretched, thick and suffocating. Victoria's fingers clutched the edges of the file like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "You should have told me." Those words sliced through me, but before I could respond, Harris let out a low grunt and crossed his arms. "Well, this is all touching," he muttered, "but you've got bigger problems." I turned to him, jaw tight. "What the hell are you talking about?" He smirked, but there was no amusement in it. "You think you're the only one looking over your shoulder? You've been sloppy, buddy. Your wife hired 2 PIs and managed to track you down. If she could do it." I stiffened. A slow, cold realization crept through me. If Victoria had found me, who else had? I reached for my phone, my heartbeat hammering as I scrolled through my recent calls, my messages, anything that might have tipped someone off. That's when I saw it. A missed call. No caller ID. And a text. "Unknown number. You should have stayed buried, Ethan." I slid down my spine. I turned the screen toward Harris and Victoria. "Did either of you tell anyone about me?" Harris scoffed. "I don't exactly advertise my clients." Victoria swallowed hard. "No, of course not." But I could see the doubt flicker across her face. Had she pushed too far? Asked the wrong person the wrong question? It didn't matter. Someone knew. And now, they were coming for me. I turned on my heel. "We need to go. Now." Victoria hesitated. "Alex." I grabbed her wrist, my voice sharp. "We don't have time for questions." Harris, to my surprise, didn't argue. He grabbed his coat, his easy smirk gone. "You got a safe house?" I hesitated. The only safe house I'd ever had was a place I never wanted to return to. But right now, it was our only option. "Yeah," I muttered. "But we need to move fast. Because if I knew anything about the people from my past, it was this. They didn't send warnings. Which meant whoever sent that message. They were already close. We left the warehouse fast, but not fast enough. The second we stepped outside, I felt it, the weight of eyes on us. I didn't stop to look. "Move," I ordered, gripping Victoria's wrist and pulling her toward the car. Harris was right behind us, scanning the street with a practiced eye. "Black SUV, 2 o'clock, he muttered under his breath. "They've been parked there a while." I didn't look. Didn't have to. I already knew what we were dealing with. They found me. "Get in the car," I said. "Now." Victoria hesitated for half a second too long. A door opened behind us. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Coming straight for us. "Victoria, move." I shoved her toward the passenger seat just as a voice rang out. "Ethan." I froze. It had been years since I'd heard that name spoken aloud. Years since I had abandoned it, buried it, killed it. Slowly, I turned. The man standing a few feet away was older, but I recognized him instantly. Mason Locke. He had been my closest friend in my old life. The only one I ever trusted. And now, he was standing here, in the middle of the night, looking at me like I was a dead man walking. Harris muttered a curse under his breath. Victoria's breath hitched. Mason took a slow step forward. "You should have stayed gone." I clenched my jaw. "Yeah? And what are you here to do about it?" His eyes flickered toward Victoria. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about me. It was about her. They weren't here to kill me. They were here to use her. A slow, predatory smile spread across Mason's face. "It's funny," he said. "I always wondered what it would take to drag you out of the shadows." His gaze slid to Victoria. "Now I know." Something inside me snapped. I reached for the gun tucked at my back and had it aimed before my next breath. "You touch her, and I put you in the ground." Mason didn't flinch. He just smiled wider, like he had already won. "You really think this ends with a gun, Ethan?" His voice was calm, almost amused. "You disappeared once, but not this time." Then he nodded toward Victoria. "Because now, you have something to lose." Mason's words settled over me like a noose tightening around my throat. "Because now, you have something to lose." I kept the gun raised, my finger twitching on the trigger. If I shot him now, it would solve one problem, but not the real problem. Mason wasn't alone. He never was. The SUV parked across the street. The men inside were waiting, watching. If I made a move, they'd be on us in seconds. Victoria's breathing was ragged beside me. She wasn't stupid. She understood exactly what was happening. Harris muttered, "We don't have time for this." His hand was resting near his own gun, but he wasn't as reckless as I was. He was calculating. Mason smirked. "You always were impulsive, Ethan." I hated hearing that name. I glanced at Victoria, then back at Mason. If he knew about her, he knew everything, which meant there was no more running. This was a fight. I lowered my gun slowly, just enough to make him think I was playing along. What do you want? Mason's smirk deepened. Oh, you know exactly what I want. The past. The secrets. The unfinished business I thought I buried. And if I didn't give it to him, he'd take Victoria instead. Harris shifted beside me. We need to go? Now. I already knew that. But leaving without a plan meant they'd follow. It meant Victoria would never be safe. Mason must have seen the war in my eyes because he tilted his head. I'll give you 12 hours. I narrowed my eyes. For what? To come find me. I clenched my jaw. If you don't. Mason's gaze flickered to Victoria again, and his meaning was crystal clear. I'll find you first. My blood burned with rage. But I knew one thing. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about ending it. For good. 12 hours. That's all Mason gave me. 12 hours to decide whether I was going to run again or face the past I thought I buried. But there was no decision to be made. Because this time, I wasn't running. This time, I was ending it. We drove in silence, the city lights blurring past us. Victoria sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her hands clenched into fists. Harris was in the back, muttering under his breath as he wiped sweat from his brow. You know you're walking into a trap, right? Harris finally said. Of course, I muttered. Mason doesn't make deals. He makes graves. Victoria turned to me then, her eyes sharp. Then why are we going? I glanced at her. The woman I had built a life with. The woman who had unknowingly uncovered everything. Because if I don't, I said, voice steady, he'll never stop. Her throat bobbed. Then let me help. A sharp pang hit my chest. She didn't understand. You already have, I admitted. Then I pulled the car over. She frowned. Why are we stopping? I turned to her, swallowing hard. This was the part one didn't want to do. This is where you get out. Her breath caught. What? I reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. Victoria, listen to me. No matter what happens next, you need to leave. Disappear. Go somewhere Mason can't find you. Her eyes filled with emotion. And what about you? I hesitated. Then I told her the truth. I don't think I'm coming back from this. Her head shook violently. No, I didn't go through all of this just to watch you. I cupped her face, pressing my forehead against hers. You have to go. She was shaking. I won't just let you walk into. You have to go. I snapped, my voice breaking. Her lips trembled. But deep down, she knew I was right. A single tear slipped down her cheek. I love you, Alex. I clenched my jaw. I love you too. And then, before she could argue, before she could fight me, I pulled the door open and pushed her out. Harris grabbed her as she stumbled, dragging her away before she could run back. I met his gaze in the rearview mirror. Get her out of here. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Then I hit the gas. The meeting point was an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. Fitting. This all started with Victoria hiring a PI. Now, it was ending in a place meant for secrets. Mason was already there, standing beneath a flickering light, his men surrounding him. He grinned when he saw me step out of the car. Right on time. I didn't answer. He took a slow step forward. No, wife. I exhaled. She's gone. He'd scared. Shame. I would have liked to meet her properly. Rage burned in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Mason smirked. So? Are we doing this the easy way or the hard way? I met his gaze. Steady. Unflinching. The final way. Then I pulled the gun. The next few minutes were a blur of gunfire, fists, and chaos. I took down 2 of Mason's men before a bullet grazed my shoulder. Pain ripped through me, but I kept moving. Mason lunged. We crashed to the ground, grappling for the gun. My fist slammed into his ribs. His elbow cracked against my jaw. You should have stayed dead, he snarled. I flipped him over, pressing the gun against his chest. So should you. Bang. Mason's body went still. I staggered to my feet, blood dripping from my arm, my chest heaving. The last of his men scattered. It was over. It was finally over. Hours later, I sat in the driver's seat of a stolen car, the city lights fading in my rearview mirror. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was emptiness. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From Victoria. Wherever you are, come back to me. I swallowed hard. I didn't know if I could, but for the first time in years, I wanted to try. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.